But it takes more than just strategies. It takes concrete investments, which is why we've made investments in mental health service workers, in a hotline to help out for Indigenous communities, in investments in education and in new schools and in new health centers, and investments in Indigenous languages and culture, recognizing that someone who is proud of their identity and their language and can use their language is far less likely to fall victim to suicidal ideation and suicides. But the problem continues. We need to do much, much more, and we will continue to do much, much more if we get that opportunity.
Also this week, a new report was released in Manitoba showing that First Nations people are dying at younger rates than non-Indigenous people. But we know that that's happening across the board in Canada. And this continues to happen since the Liberals have been in power for the past 4 years. If re-elected, what are you going to do to change that?
We have made significant progress over the past 4 years on tangible things like lifting boil water advisories. We've lifted 87 long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities, but there's still more than 50 to go, although we feel we are on track to lifting all those that remain by the 5-year mark in the spring of 2021 that we had committed to. We are investing in new schools. We're investing in new health centers. We are investing in better partnerships in support for First Nations and Indigenous post-secondary education. We're working directly with the Métis Nation on economic development and investments. We're moving forward on an urban and Indigenous strategy as well to recognize all those Indigenous peoples who face real challenges in our urban environments. There is so much more to do. We have taken meaningful steps forward that have made a significant difference in the lives of many Indigenous people, but we're the first to recognize there is still a long way to go. What took generations and indeed centuries to break, it's going to take time to fix. And I am impatient, but I also know the only way to move forward properly is in full partnership with Indigenous peoples, is empowering Indigenous communities themselves to determine the right path forward for them. And that sometimes takes a little bit longer because in many cases these communities have never been asked what it is that they want before. So we will work with them and be there to respect them, to empower them, and to build the future that they choose, not the future that we think from Ottawa would be the right future for them. That takes a little longer, I will admit, and every day longer we take means more kids struggling for longer. But we have to get this right, and we have to do it in the full spirit of respect and partnership, and that is what our government has been focused on and will continue to be focused on.
David Aiken from Global News. Good morning, or good afternoon, Prime Minister. I know there'll be a lot of people here today of all races who will be very happy to hear you denounce racism in all its form and your earlier behavior. But the Prime Minister's job was not created so you could work through your issues. Maybe it's time that you realize you're not the indispensable man. As the leader of the Liberal Party, as the Prime Minister, you have very many capable leaders in your party, that perhaps you should step aside for some reflection, for some more understanding and discussion. Have you considered asking someone else to lead the party in this election?
I spent the morning speaking with candidates, with fellow Liberals, with allies, with leaders within racialized communities across the country, and I will continue to do the work that is necessary to keep us moving forward in the right way. Canadians have an important choice to make. Canadians have an important choice to make on October 21st. And I trust Canadians to make that right choice. I certainly hope that they will continue to support us in the work that we're doing, but they might not. And I know that that is something that all Canadians get to decide. And they get to bring in all sorts of different factors, because every Canadian has a different way of looking at what matters to them. And all I hope for is that Canadians take very seriously this responsibility and this choice that we will make as a country on October 21st. And until then, I will continue to put forward the very best team, the very best approach that I can to talk about how we're going to build a better future for Canadians.
I'd like to just follow up on the tone now of the campaign. It had a different tone until yesterday, and that tone was largely involved with your party finding lots of very questionable behaviors from many of your opponents, one of them right here in Winnipeg and Winnipeg North. Can you tell us how the tone is going to change as we start talking about things? Is it going to be so important to be digging up people's social media posts of the last 2, 3, 4 years? Are you going to be focused on that, or your party, pardon me, going to be focused on that?
Over the past 3 days, we have put forward significant policy announcements on how we will continue to do the work that we laid out over the past 4 years, work that resulted in creating over 1 million jobs and lifting 900,000 people out of poverty. We talked about raising the Canada Child Benefit for kids under 1 to make sure that more parents have the ability to give all the opportunities to their kids. We talked about doubling our investments in childcare so that there is better help for after school and before school care for parents who need it. And we've talked about supporting our seniors by increasing the old age security by 10% for seniors once they reach 75, because we recognize that costs continue to go up. We're going to continue to make contrasts with our opponents. We're going to continue to put forward strong pieces of policy that will demonstrate how we believe that investing in Canadians is the right path forward. But we will always and continue to do that in a way that pushes back against intolerance and racism every step of the way.
Last question.
Mr. Trudeau, the next time you're in a mosque or temple, how can you look at those people and tell them that you fully understand what they're going through?
That is a question I've had to answer from the very first time I had the opportunity to walk into a gurdwara or a mandir or a mosque in my riding and across the country. When people see someone who came from a place of privilege asking for the opportunity to represent them in the House of Commons, asking them for the opportunity to be their voice, even though obviously I'm someone who has had tremendous opportunities and advantages in my life. And that conversation I had that started over 10 years ago when I started my journey to being a politician is a conversation I need to continue to have every single day whenever I meet a voter, whenever I meet a Canadian, whenever I meet someone who is looking to me to serve them, to defend them, to represent them, and to build a better future with them. And I look forward to continuing these conversations that I get to have with Canadians from coast to coast to coast every single day as I travel across this country.
Just a follow-up. Sorry.
En français? Ah, excusez. La question de comment je pourrais bien représenter quelqu'un de si différent de moi a été une question que j'ai dû répondre, à laquelle j'ai dû répondre depuis mes débuts en politique. Je suis quelqu'un qui est venu de beaucoup de privilèges et de vouloir représenter une communauté aussi diverse que Papineau, où il y a des défis économiques énormes. J'ai dû démontrer que je suis là pour mettre ma voix et mes capacités et les opportunités que j'ai eues au service de gens qui n'ont pas eu ces opportunités. Et je crois qu'au cours des 4 dernières années au gouvernement, mais des 10-12 dernières années en tant que politicien, j'ai démontré que le travail que je fais pour bien représenter les gens de toute diversité, il y a toujours mieux à faire, mais est au cœur de ce que je fais et de ce que je continuerai à faire.
And just to follow up, you've apologized, but what policies and procedures would you enact that are anti-racism? Because as you can tell, there's people who have been affected by this.
Indeed. We were the first Canadian government to recognize the UN Decade of People of African Descent. We were the first government to specifically put forward $25 million over the coming years for the Black community to support grassroots community organizations and create opportunities for Black youth. We put forward a national anti-racism strategy that talks about anti-Black racism, that talks about anti-Semitism, talks about Islamophobia. We have moved forward in a significant way in partnership with a broad range of Canadians of all sorts of diversities and their groups. But we recognize, as you point out, there is always much more to do, and we will keep doing it. The choices we make on building a better future for all Canadians continues to be something that we are very much focused on as a country, as a government, and as a party. And we will continue to focus on that. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Prime Minister,
Thank you, everyone.
Next time.